Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. When August 29th finally arrived, Genoa City was filled with a tense atmosphere that could be sliced with a knife, and everyone appeared to be carrying the blade behind their back. Kane's choice to reject Victor's offer was a statement of independence as much as a financial decision. He was done being a pawn in Victor's strategic chess game, and he made that plain to himself, if not aloud. Kane was not naive, though. He was aware that saying no to Victor Newman would have immediate, scathing, and potentially violent consequences. He therefore started subtly strengthening his ties, identifying the few people he could rely on, and initiating his own countermove, which would not only shield him but also tip the scales in his favor. Kyle was in full damage control mode at the time. Claire was now doubting everything about him after the Audra scandal, and his customary charm wasn't going to work this time. Beyond flowers and apologies, he planned a lavish, almost cinematic gesture, a private rooftop supper at nightfall, accompanied by her favorite vintage wine and a string quartet, all illuminated by hundreds of candles. But there was desperation underneath the passion. Kyle was aware that Claire may start seeking elsewhere if she didn't believe in him again. However, considering the complex network of players in Genoa City, elsewhere might very well mean someone who would use her heartbreak against him. On the other hand, Sharon was extremely vigilant. Not only was Nick spending more time with Victor raising red flags, but Sharon could also observe subtle changes in his tone, his guardedness, and the way he sidestepped some queries. Her thoughts turned to other instances in which Victor had drawn Nick into his darker world, situations that almost cost Nick relationships and parts of himself. Sharon had no intention of watching history happen again. She quietly vowed to watch over both father and son, even if it meant becoming involved in arguments she would like to stay out of. Billy's undercover operation was becoming increasingly risky in other places. It was one thing to play nice with Kane, but as the days went by, Billy's defenses were being eroded by Kane's charm and compelling arguments. Even Jack sensed that a cue was being reached, one that Billy would not be able to avoid crossing, yet he continued to give Billy those probing, "I'm trusting you" looks. Every significant character was on the verge of betrayal, reconciliation, exposure, or retaliation at the conclusion of the month. A chaotic, combustible September was promised by the tightening knot of Kane's independence, Kyle's love gamble, and Sharon's silent vigilance. Furthermore, messy was simply another word for about to get interesting in Genoa City. Kane turns down Victor's plan, Kyle's romantic fix, and Sharon's red flags. The Young and the Restless spoilers for the upcoming 3 weeks, August 12th to August 29th, suggest that Kane Ashby will turn down Victor Newman's scheme, while Sharon Newman sees warning signs and Kyle Abbott works on a love fix-it. Claire Newman will realize she can no longer put up with Audra Charles causing so much drama during the week of August 12th to 15th. Claire will respond boldly after witnessing Audra kiss Kyle. Audra may soon be burned because she has been playing with fire. Audra would find it difficult to defend herself since Claire might be the one to ensure that Nate Hastings is fully aware of what his girlfriend has been up to. If Nate receives updates, he will have several reasons to snap, including Audra's kisses with Kyle and her involvement in Victor's scheme of romantic ruin. Lily Winters will inform Holden Novak that Damien Kane was slain on the trip to France, shocking him. Lily will expose Kane's lack of integrity and urge Holden to exercise caution after he will trick her into believing he was unaware that Kane was Aristotle Dumas. Kane will probably reject Victor's suggestion to band together against the Abbotts in the interim. Instead, Victor would devise a plan of Kane retaliation and eventually enlist Nick Newman to assist. Billy Abbott will be the target of Nick's fury following a significant outburst. Billy should prepare himself for the criticism if he intends to support Kane, even if he will only be acting in this way to keep Jabbo safe. Peter Bergman's character Jack Abbott will respond to a compelling invitation. Jack will finally focus on Lily Winters and a big promise, even though Kane may call him in for a business meeting. Kane may promise to go to any lengths to let Lily realize that he still feels like he belongs with her. Christine Blair and Danny Romalotti will require assistance because their wedding is approaching. Christine may be able to lock in her matron of honor by turning to Lauren Fenmore Baldwin. Regarding Danny, he may receive a pledge from Daniel Romalotti Jr. to perform best man duties. Daniel will also discuss with Danny the complexity of the situation and his romantic interest in Tessa Porter. It appears that Sharon may notice some red flags regarding Nick's behavior across town. Will Sharon be concerned that Victor will turn Nick against him? According to Y&R teasers, the Newmans will have some dangerous intentions over the week of August 18th to 22nd, but Victor will ultimately rely on defeating Kane. Lily's job may turn out to be more challenging than anticipated as she attempts to gather intelligence while playing Kane. Lily's genuine affection for Kane may interfere with her objectives and serve as a reminder of their past love. After all of the Audra chaos, Kyle might have a difficult time getting Claire to trust him once more. Claire will have to determine whether they can move past everything that has happened after Kyle repairs the damage and possibly makes a big gesture. The week of August 25th to 29th is when Billy's insider plan might become more complex. What would happen if Kane discovered Billy's scheme? Or worse, if he persuaded Billy to turn against Jack and his own family business? Jack will make an effort to have faith in Billy, but this could go horribly wrong. However, as Diane Jenkins Abbott would want to make up for their ruined honeymoon plans, Jack will eventually find time for romance. Regarding Mariah Copeland and the memories that plague her, she might also encounter some new difficulties. Would Mariah eventually notice Daniel flirting with Tessa and question whether her wife is moving on? Kane Ashby had always taken pleasure in his ability to defend himself, but when Victor Newman approached him with an offer to work together against the Abbotts, Kane not only hesitated but outright turned him down, leaving the famous businessman with a gleam of icy steel in his eyes. Kane's motivation went beyond pride. He didn't believe Victor's ultimate goal, and he didn't want to be a pawn in someone else's scheming. Victor, however, wasn't a man who accepted no lightly. Victor was already mentally rearranging his plan by the time Kane left the coffee shop where the meeting had taken place. He was figuring out who could take Kane's position in the scheme and make it even more deadly. That replacement was Nick Newman, who, in spite of his own moral principles, was drawn into Victor's scheme under the pretext of protecting family interests. Meanwhile, Kane's rejection caused a chain reaction, and Billy Abbott, feigning support for Kane for Jabot's sake, found himself balancing his allegiance to his brother Jack with the necessity of remaining close enough to Kane to predict his next moves. Billy's act, however, was getting old. Kane could smell the betrayal from a mile away if he made one mistake. Claire Newman had been keeping herself together at society after witnessing Audra Charles and Kyle Abbott engage in a lip lock, but holding it together was an overly optimistic statement. She kept replaying the scene in her mind, including how Nate Hastings had been unaware of the sparks shooting in the opposite direction, Kyle's shocked expression when he noticed her, and Audra's smug little smirk. It didn't help that Claire had been getting rumors that Audra wasn't merely teasing Kyle. Rather, she had been involved in Victor's scheme to break up a relationship, which infuriated Claire. Claire wasn't simply thinking about ending their relationship. She was planning a kind of retaliation that would directly target Audra and Kyle. Knowing full well that there would be nuclear repercussions, that retaliation might involve making sure Nate was aware of every vile detail. Holden Novak was shocked by Lily Winter's revelation that Damien Kane had been assassinated on the trip to France, the journey that had been tainted by shifting alliances and secrets. Lily nearly believed Holden's convincing act of shock, but she couldn't get rid of the feeling that he was hiding more information. She pointed him that Kane had been hiding under the alias Aristotle Dumas and cautioned him about putting his trust in him. Holden nodded in agreement, but he was already planning how to use this knowledge. As all of this was going on in the background, Jack Abbott got an unexpected invitation that initially appeared harmless but suggested the beginning of a new front in the conflict with Kane. He understood that there was a personal component to Lily, but he also couldn't get rid of the idea that Kane's economic ambitions were encroaching on Jabot's domain. Kane's obsession with his ex-wife was reviving, and Jack was concerned that Lily may lose sight of the wider picture if her emotions became entangled in the quest to learn more about Kane. Amidst all of this, Christine Blair and Danny Romalotti were happily preparing for their wedding, with Danny persuading Daniel Romalotti Jr. to be his best man and Christine enlisting Lauren Fenmore Baldwin as the maid of honor. However, Daniel's thoughts were elsewhere, and his sexual interest in Tessa Porter was growing more complex, particularly in light of Mariah Copeland's persistent fears and eerie recollections of previous betrayals. Sharon Newman had been seeing minor changes in Nick's behavior across town. He was more decisive, more terse, more Victor-like. Although she had hard evidence, She had a gut feeling that Victor was dragging Nick in the direction of evil, and she was aware from past experience that it was very difficult to break free once Victor had his hooks in. By the week of August 18th to 22nd, Victor was well on with his dangerous schemes for the Newmans. Now that he had Nick as his inside man, he was probably too sure that Kane's rejection would not matter. However, the distinction between the scammer and her enduring affections for Kane became more hazy as Lily attempted to continue playing him for information. She thought back to their past together and the way they used to be, and she felt guilty for questioning whether he was as unredeemable as she had persuaded herself. Kyle Abbott, meanwhile, was rushing to undo the harm caused to Claire. Grand gestures didn't make treachery go away, and Claire would always imagine him leaning into Audra's kiss, whether on purpose or not, whenever he attempted to explain. Kyle understood that the only thing that would truly count was demonstrating that Audra was the manipulator and he was the victim, so he thought about pulling out all the stops, flowers, trips, and loving messages. Claire wasn't sure if she was prepared to accept that story. By the time August 25th to 29th arrived, Billy's role as Kane's fictitious ally had grown dangerous. Kane might reverse the situation and offer Billy a bargain so alluring that betraying Jack may begin to seem like a realistic alternative if he figured out the deception. For his part, Jack was making an effort to have faith in his brother, but Diane kept reminding him that Billy might become erratic when under duress. Jack wanted to make time to resume his romance with Diane after their honeymoon went awry, but he also realized he had to watch for Kane and Billy. Mariah's worries were getting worse elsewhere. She sensed a change with Tessa, but she wasn't sure if it was genuine or if her fears were simply playing tricks. Mariah was kept awake at night by the fear that Tessa would move on or, worse, find solace in someone else, such as Daniel. Victor was still out there in the midst of it all, keeping an eye on every move, playing every side, and waiting for the ideal opportunity to come. Kane may have believed that he had the upper hand because he had rejected Victor's proposal, but in Genoa City, underestimating Victor Newman was always the first step to your own demise. The only sound in Victor Newman's study was the ticking of an old clock, a rhythmic sound that strangely contrasted with the tempest that was building within of him. Earlier that morning, Victor's conversation with Kane Ashby had ended in frustration, but it continued to replay in his head like an unresolved chess game. Kane had been standing across from him, his jaw set and eyes icy, and he had delivered his refusal with a confidence that made Victor want to press even more. Victor had warned, in a low but steely voice, "You're making a mistake." "Perhaps, but at least it will be my error, not one of your power maneuvers masquerading as a commercial opportunity," Kane had retorted. Few men had resisted Victor's proposals without recoiling, but he had witnessed enough do so. Kane's choice was painful not only because it was a rejection but also because it meant that Victor's well-thought-out strategy to defeat the Abbotts was now lacking a vital player. Nevertheless, if Victor Newman was skilled at anything, it was adapting. And he adjusted. Victor was already planning a different strategy by the afternoon. Nick would receive a proposition when he accepted his invitation to what he assumed would be a family supper. Victor intended to utilize Nick's recent restlessness to entice him into the game by giving him a more hands-on experience. Victor was unaware that Sharon had already started to notice minor shifts in Nick's behavior. Their informal exchanges had become a little sharper. When she attempted to bring up Faith, Noah, or even Mariah, Nick appeared distracted, his thoughts elsewhere. When it came to the Newmans, Sharon's intuition was usually correct, and now it was telling her that Victor had his hooks in him once more. Kane, meanwhile, wasn't just dismissing Victor's suggestion without a backup plan. Since coming back from France, he has been steadily developing his own long-term strategy. A series of meetings held offshore, rumors of collaborations in Singapore and Dubai, and an unexpectedly cordial lunch with an Abbott board member who wasn't precisely Jack's ally. He didn't want to be Victor's puppet. If nothing else, he hoped Victor would discover too late that he had misjudged him. Lily stepped in at that point, though she was still unaware of the entire extent of his scheme. In reality, Kane had previously expected her to try something similar, but she thought her mission to approach Kane was her own, one that Holden had planted and that Jack had gently supported. He applauded her efforts to get intel since it provided him with the ideal opportunity to conflate sentiment and strategy. They found themselves alone in his apartment one evening, with the skyline glistening behind them. With a hint of challenge mixed with nostalgia, Kane replied softly, "I miss this." You don't mind controlling me, Lily shot back, attempting to maintain a harsh tone, but her eyes flickered. I miss us, he said plainly. And her defenses faltered for a moment. Even after reminding herself of her true objective, Lily was unable to get the sound of his words out of her head when she left later that evening. The damage control mission in Kyle's reality was turning out to be more difficult than he had anticipated. Claire hadn't asked him in for coffee, but she hadn't exactly slammed the door in his face either. The underlying problem was trust, but the consequences of Audra's kiss were already severe. Claire wasn't going to give up her heart just because Kyle arrived with flowers and an apology because she had already been burnt by family members and so-called friends. Kyle, though, was adamant. He used every tactic at his disposal, from having Summer whisper a word of support into Claire's ear to by coincidence turning up at her favorite lunch place. He even went so far as to arrange a low-key evening at a rooftop greenhouse for the two of them, replete with champagne, soft lighting, and a selection of Claire's favorite tunes. Claire arrived and carefully inspected the setup. With her arms crossed, she said, "This is a lot of trouble for someone who can't keep his lips away from Audra Charles." Kyle's jaw tightened at the sting of her words, and he gulped. "I made a mistake. I won't pretend that I didn't, either. However, I want you to think that I've changed since then. You are the only person I want." It was another question entirely whether or not she would believe him. Billy Abbott was engrossed in his inside man function at the same time. Working with Kane required a risky double game. Giving Jack just enough information to keep him informed while simultaneously maintaining Kane's belief that their partnership was genuine. Billy had lots of experience lying, so he wasn't particularly awful at it, but the ongoing stress was starting to get to him. Meanwhile, Jack was becoming impatient. Yesterday was the day he wanted results. Diane attempted to soothe him by recommending that they spend a few days concentrating on their delayed honeymoon plans, but Jack's thoughts were racing. What happens if Billy overreacts? One evening, Jack confided in Diane. Diane said, "Then you trust that your brother will remember where his loyalty lies," but even she didn't seem totally persuaded. By August 18th to 22nd, Victor's Plan B was well underway. Unaware that the transaction was really intended to undermine Kane's new European contracts, Nick had grudgingly consented to meet with one of Victor's contacts in the energy industry. When Sharon heard Nick taking a heated phone call, she learnt about the meeting. "Are you and your father working together once more?" Later, with a calm voice and piercing gaze, she accused. In a defensive tone, Nick answered, "It's business, Sharon." "With Victor, it's never just business," she retorted. "You and I are both aware of that. You always end up doing something you regret when you continue down this path." Nick expressed more with his silence than with words. When Lily unintentionally overheard a segment of a phone call between Kane and an unknown individual, the tension escalated. "We move after Victor makes his first play," she heard in a low, circumspect tone, but it made her skin prickle. Her thoughts were racing. Was Kane going to block Victor's onslaught before it even began? Or was he planning something more significant that might surprise everyone? Ever the opportunist, Holden recognized a chance. He advised Lily to lean in even more, perhaps even making it seem as though she was thinking about getting back together romantically. The part of her that wanted to keep Jack and Jabbo safe recognized the need, but the suggestion made her stomach turn. Over the course of August 25th to 29th, the stakes were rising sharply. Victor's partnership with Nick was starting to take shape, but so was Kane's covert network of associates. Kane was asking Billy delicate questions that felt like traps, and Billy's cover was beginning to come apart. Though his perseverance was beginning to weaken Claire's willpower, she was still unsure about Kyle. And now that Sharon's warning signs were clearly visible, she had even told Mariah, who encouraged her to speak with Victor face to face. That altercation could be the catalyst for the next detonation. Because Sharon would be forcing Victor to choose between telling her the truth and making her his next target to eliminate if she entered his office and expressed her suspicions.